Welcome to the Counting Points and Saving High Score tutorial. In this tutorial, you'll be learning how to make a scorekeeping system that automatically updates and saves the high score value. So let's take a look at this scene first. I can click this Add 10 Points button, which adds 10 points to our score. But then if we stop clicking it for a couple seconds, it goes back to 0. And we lose our current score. But you'll see our high score stays at the last highest score we reached. We're just using a button for the tutorial, but the principles are the same if you're collecting coins or killing zombies or rolling up balls of junk to turn into planets. And of course, we want this score to save so you can come back to your game later and still have the high score. So if I stop the game right now, and then I hit play again, you'll see that our high score stuck around. That's because it's being saved locally to PlayerPrefs on my computer. What's PlayerPrefs? Calm down, I'm getting to that. First, let's set up the scene. Okay, so I'm gonna add in a canvas, and I'm gonna give it a panel. Now I'm gonna give the panel 2 buttons, and I'm gonna give the panel 4 text objects. Instead of clicking through the menu 4 times, you can make things just the once and then select them and press Control D or Command D to duplicate it. Let's get these named and sorted out. Call one of the buttons Add Points Button, and the other one we'll call Clear All Scores Button. Now let's name these text objects. Call the first one Current Score Int, and then the next one just Current Score. So this will be the number value of our current score, and this will just be the text that literally says current score. And we'll call this one High Score Int, and this one is just High Score. Same deal. Here's the number value of our high score, and then here's the text that literally says high score. Okay, now put this current score as a child of current score int, and high score as a child of high score int. This is just to keep things organized. All right, let's put some text in these objects now. For the game objects with int, I'm just gonna type in any random numbers. So if I come over here to our components, instead of new text, I'm just gonna go da-da-da-da, and same thing with this one. Everything's overlapping right now, but don't worry, we'll get everything laid out how we need it in just a second. Then for the current score, we'll just write in current score. And while we're here, let's make it green. We'll do something similar for this high score. Write in high score, and this one will be red. For our buttons, we'll give them the same text as what they're named. So for this Add Points one, selecting the text object underneath it, calling it Add 10 Points. And then for the Clear All Scores one, select the text object underneath it, and we'll put Clear All Scores. Lastly, let's just arrange these so they're not all overlapping. Select your panel, and we're gonna add a new component on it called Vertical Layout Group. This automatically arranges your objects in a vertical layout, and we can change this alignment to middle center. See, that just centered up right now. I'm unchecking these Child Force Expand boxes. Quick word of warning, messing around with these UI components work in a way that is destructive. So for example, if you turn this option on and then turn it off, you'll see that turning it off doesn't revert to what it was before. To revert, you need to undo, as in coming up here to edit and then undo whatever it is that you did. So as you're tweaking things, just be careful and pay close attention to the changes being made. The way a vertical layout group component arranges items is by their order in the hierarchy. So the hierarchy of this panel determines which of these items get stacked first. You'll see that the Add Points button is at the top, and the high score is down here at the bottom. So you can just reorganize these by moving them around here in the hierarchy. Let's set it up like this. High score at the top, current score underneath it, then add points and clear all scores. You can also see how things are aligned in your scene view by selecting one of these items, let's say for example the high score int, and then putting your mouse over the scene view and hitting F. And now we can come over here and look at it like this. Could help also to click this 2D button. And now if I wanted to put this above right here, and maybe something like this as well. And then you could change how much spacing there is between these things by selecting your panel and coming over to the vertical layout group component, and they have a spacing option here, which you can drag to space these out. We can make some of these values bigger and center them too. So if you wanted to center them, you can click on this high score int, have this center alignment, goes in the center. You could do the same thing for this. You can also select multiple of them and do the same thing, like that. If I wanted these values to be bigger, I can also select them and change their font size. Something like that. And can maybe do it like this. Same thing with these ones. Something like that. It's good to stretch the game screen around and see how your UI scales for different resolutions. You'll see how this gets cut off when I squish it in like this, and this seems to work out okay. Right now our UI is going to get cut off in some resolutions, so an easy way to preserve the way it looks right now, regardless of how wide or tall the screen is by changing some of the settings on our canvas scaler component located on our canvas. This canvas scaler is right here. Let's change this UI scale mode to scale with screen size. And in this match mode, we could change to expand. Now you'll see that our UI stays more or less consistent as we adjust this. If you wanted this to be a little bigger, you could select your panel, get the scale tool, scale it up as well. All right, so with all of the game objects in order, let's start programming some FSMs. Let's add an FSM to the Add Points button. Add an FSM to the Points button. And we're gonna call it Add Points. We'll call this start state Reset Score. And we're gonna throw in a set int value. We'll make a score variable and set it to 0. So we just leave that. Now make a new state and call it Add Points. Now we're going to throw in a int add and a wait action. So this int add is going to add 10 points to our score variable. And we'll have this timer wait 2 seconds before going back to that reset score state. Goes back here. To finish this FSM, we'll give the add point state a UI click global transition. So when the player clicks this button, the FSM will take them to this state, and the player will have to click the button again in less than 2 seconds, because if they don't, it will send back to this first state, and their current score will get reset. Okay, so we're gonna go over to the current score game object, current score int. We're gonna add a new FSM on it, and we're gonna call it current score. We're going to call this first state set score text field. And we're going to throw in a get FSM int and a UI text set text. All right, so we'll put this at the bottom. All right, this get FSM int will be taking our add points button, so we can drag and drop our add points button into here, looking at its add points FSM, and the variable we're getting, the score. We'll store that value here in a new variable called current score. Then select every frame, so this is always staying up to date. This UI text set text will be setting the text component on this game object, so leave use owner, but the text we'll be giving it will be converting our current score in. So you could have this text as a variable going to convert our current score. The reason you have to convert here is because setting text uses string variables, which is any old text including numbers, but our current score variable is strictly a number. It is an int variable. This conversion happens automatically whenever you find something under the convert section. This action will also be running every frame. Let's hit play and see what happens. All right, so our current score says 0, right? If I hit add points, you see that? Can keep adding, but if I wait longer than 2 seconds, it goes back to 0. All right, so now let's set up our high score. Let's add an FSM to the high score and call it high score. Call the first state less than high score. And we're gonna throw in a get FSM int. We're gonna specify the game object as our current score int. We're going to select its FSM, current score, and the variable current score. And I'll copy and paste this because I'm going to make a new variable. Paste that in now, also called current score. This will be running every frame. Then throw in an int compare. The value to compare will be the current score, and we'll be comparing it to a new variable that we can call high score. If the current score is greater than the high score, then we'll send this event next. This will be running every frame. And we're going to send this transition off to a new state. We'll call this one update high score. All right, so we're going to throw in a set int value. And we're going to be setting our high score variable to whatever our current score is. And then we're going to throw in a UI text set text and put this after it. We're going to keep this set to owner, and the text we're going to be setting will be high score. But again, we need to convert it because it's an int value. So selecting high score. And now just add a finish transition here and send it back to the first state. So you should be able to hit play. And to be honest, actually, maybe putting a bunch of numbers there isn't the best idea. So what I'll do really quick is change this high score int to 0. Then when I hit play, start off with 0, and click and adding 10 points. But if I stop clicking for 2 seconds, our current score gets set back to 0, but our high score stays. So when you click again, this high score doesn't change unless it beats that high score, unless the current score is higher than it. So now it will change. But right now, when we stop playing, you see our high score is 130. Press stop, press play again. And our high score gets set back to 0. Gets wiped clean. So where's the fun in that? There's no record of the high score. We want to be able to secure our legacy as permanently as possible. So if we could program a machine to inscribe our high score into stone, I would be all for it, but we're going to have to settle for good old-fashioned local storage by using PlayerPrefs. PlayerPrefs is a kind of data that Unity stores onto the computer that the game is being played on. Here's the page on PlayerPrefs in Unity's documentation. You'll see that it says it can store string, float, and integer values into the user's platform registry. So when we use PlayerPrefs to save information, we'll have to use some sort of system that only uses these types of values. And it also says, Unity stores PlayerPrefs data differently based on which operating system the application runs on. In the file paths given on this page, the company name and product name are the names you set in Unity's player settings. Then it shows you here, if you're on macOS, this is the directory that it'll be saved in. On Windows, this is the directory that it'll be saved in, etc., etc. And when you're actually making the game and running it in the editor, aka in editor play mode, like this right here, here's where PlayerPrefs is stored. That's if you're doing it in Mac, and here's if you're doing it in Windows. Good thing to note too is Unity stores PlayerPrefs in a local registry without encryption, so do not use PlayerPrefs data to store sensitive data. So let's set up our high score system to save using PlayerPrefs. We're gonna create a new state in our high score FSM. I'm gonna arrange these like this, I'm gonna put it underneath, and add this new state. I'm gonna call it init, which is just short for initialize, which just means set to the value or put in the condition appropriate to the start of an operation, which just means set things up as they need to be when the thing starts. So I'm gonna set this initialize state to our start state, and it's here where we'll throw in a PlayerPrefs get int action. This count value just sets how many int values we want to get. So if I put something like 3, it'll give us 3 slots to put in 3 different values, but we just want 1 right now. So here in the key value, write in high score. This will look in the PlayerPrefs file for a value called high score, and then we can store that value in our high score variable we already have, right here. So after it gets that high score, we want it to display, so we can just copy and paste the UI text set text action from our update high score. So I can select this, copy it, come back over here, and paste it in. Now I can make a finish transition and send that off to less than high score. Now if we ran it right now, nothing would work because we haven't stored the high score PlayerPrefs value yet. We're just telling it to get it. We can store that value by going into our update high score state and throwing in a PlayerPrefs set int. And again, we'll write in high score and make sure this is spelled exactly the same way, capitalization and everything. And since we're using a set int action, it will be setting that value with whatever we put here. So we can use this high score variable to set the high score PlayerPrefs value. So now if you hit play, you can rack up a high score and then lose your current score. Try beating it, and then you get all mad because you can't beat that score, so you turn off the game, you take a walk, clear your mind, and when you come back to the game, the high score is still there from before, but now you're feeling fresh and up for the challenge, and you could beat the high score if you just can get to... I was close, but I can always try again tomorrow. But let's say you're a sore loser and can't stand the sight of a mountain that you can't climb. Well, if we want to clear this high score, we can do that. So first, we're going to select our Clear All Scores button. Going to add a new Playmaker FSM on it. Let's call this FSM Clear Save. Now we're going to make a new state called Clear Score. And we're going to add in a send event action. We're going to set this to game object, and we're going to be specifying the add points button. Now the event we want to send will be a global event. We want to make a new one. We can call this reset high score. So this will send that reset high score event to our add points button. We haven't added in a state that will respond to that yet, but let's take care of a few things first before we go do that. So I'm going to copy and paste this, except for this one, I'm going to set our current score int. I'll paste in another one, and this one's gonna be our high score int. It's very important to send these events in this order because this is the order in which the game objects influence each other. There's a sort of chain of command, and we need to start at the source, which is the add points button, because this is where points are originally made, and then work our way to the top, our high score being the last place that scores get transferred to. We need to add in a global transition UI events UI click. So when they click the button, it gets sent here. So with these send events all set up, let's actually put the global events in each of these game objects. So first, in the add points button, we're gonna create a new state and we'll call it clear score. And we're gonna add in that global transition, reset high score. So now when you click the clear all scores button, it'll get sent here, but we need to do some things first. Just a couple of things. We'll add in a set int value, and we're gonna be setting our score to 0. And when it's done, we could just go back to the start state. These other two FSMs still have the old scores stored in them, so we'll go to the next one, which is current score. Gonna do something very similar. Gonna add in that state, call it clear score, give it that global transition, reset high score. It'll also have a set int value, this time setting the current score, setting that to 0, and it'll send back to here. The last one in line is our high score one, and we'll just add in another new state and call this clear score again. Do the same thing, adding global transition, reset high score. Now, the thing that's different about this is that we're gonna give this a PlayerPrefs delete key, and we wanna delete the high score values that we've been saving. And then while we're here, we'll do a set int value after it. Now, if you look over here at the update high score, the thing that happens when we're over here is it sets the high score as whatever the current score was. So what we could do is just set this as current score, set it to 0, and have it send back over here. So when it gets here, so everything gets set to 0, and it updates our UI and everything. So now if we hit run, we still have our high score up, and I could add points, but if I can't quite make it up to where I once was to reach that glorious high score, I can always just clear all scores. There we go. Now I'm the high score holder. Be sure to check out our other videos to learn all the various features of Playmaker. Links to more learning resources are in the description.